Right, well, as most of you know, my name is Julie Groves, and I'm the manager of the Centre for Advancement of Outcomes-Based Education, which is a part of the TLC, the Teaching and Learning Centre here at Lingnan University. Now, I know some of our audience here today are here because next semester they'll be taking part in our centre's MARP, Mini Action Research Project on Learnings and Outcomes at Lingnan. And I know others of you are here because you saw the poster advertisement, and so you have some kind of interest in action research. So either way, I'd like to welcome you all here. I thought first, can we just briefly go around and just say what name and department you are all from we actually start? So maybe we can start from you.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Jonathan Fong. I'm from the Science Unit.
Mark McGinley, also from the Science Unit.
Mark Levine from SEAL. I know it's.
Joe Choi from Faculty of Education, Chinese U.
Peter Stoffel from the Teaching and Learning Unit here.
Lin from Department of Translation of Lingnan University.
Vivian Lin from Department of Applied Psychology.
And we have
Andrew from the Department of English.
Just in time.
and my co-presenter here is Preet Paradha from the English department. She, in the last triennium, was a recipient of a large-scale grant from the CAOBE to conduct an action research project, which she herself will tell you about shortly. Before I start, I would like to draw all your attention again to our book repository in the back there. This is our mobile book repository on OBE-related books, which you are free to browse during the breaks, and you are free to borrow from. So if you're interested, just let me know, and I will sign you up for a particular book. And by the way, that book repository has one whole section on action research. One of those whole shelves on the right, middle right one, is all on action research. Okay, now today, this is what we will be doing, very roughly. I will be talking about what action research is and isn't, and various things about action research. Then Preet will go on to discuss her project and talk about the whole action research cycle. Then I will go back to talking a little bit about publishing and sharing the results of action research studies. Now, first of all, what is action research? Well, as the word research suggests, it is a type of research. It's a specific branch of educational research. Here it is defined as any systematic inquiry conducted by teachers, administrators, counsellors, or others with a vested interest in the teaching and learning process or environment, for the purpose of gathering information about how their particular schools operate, how they teach, and how their students learn. The main goal is to address local level problems with the anticipation of finding immediate solutions. Basically, it's a planned, systematic approach to understanding the learning processes of our own students. And the most important point is here, the focus, it's on the learning processes of our students. What action research is mainly about. So this, of course, relates it directly to an outcomes-based system, because what action research does is it enables us to help our students to better achieve the intended learning outcomes. Within that large area of intended learning outcomes, these are some of the specific areas that you may end up doing your research within. For instance, the classroom environment, classroom management, teaching pedagogies, instructional methods, instructional materials, grading and evaluation, and basically anything that impacts on students' learning, you can make as a focus for action research. What does action research involve? It's a cyclical process of systematic collection of information, followed by active reflection, then action based on that reflection. I just want to point out here reflection, which is at the core of action research. Reflection, it's an integral part of the process. It's the act of critically exploring what you are doing, why you've decided to do it, and what its effects have been. Biggs and Tan, I think you all know Professor John Biggs. This is his book that we're always recommending, and there's several copies over there, available. Throughout his book, he uses this fictional example of two teacher trainees, Robert and Susan. Robert is a surface thinker, and he just wants to get the work done in as little amount of time as possible and get out there and get working. Whereas Susan as a student, she is a deep thinker. So in time, they both graduate and they both become teachers. Then after 20 years of teaching, Susan has had 20 years of reflective teaching practice because she has then become a reflective teacher. On the other hand, Robert has had 1 year of teaching experience, repeated 19 times. And so the principle here is that we can never truly master our own professions to the point where we could just keep doing what we've always done and just expect it to keep working. It's like our students. We're always wanting our students to be lifelong learners. We also need to be lifelong learners, and reflection with constant adjustment is a part of this. So, successful teachers are those who constantly and systematically reflect on their actions and the consequences of those actions. Each student or group of students constantly provides us with unique challenges and opportunities, many of which require unique approaches. Systematic reflection in the form of action research can provide the stimulus for changing and improving practice in order to make it appropriate for those unique individuals with whom we work. More reasons for why should we do it. The main reason we should do it, of course, is because it improves the teaching and the learning in our classrooms. It gives us a greater understanding of the situation or the students or the specific problems that are being faced. It helps us to alter our instructional methods so that they become more effective. Also, it can help answer long-standing questions that we may have had, and also identify problems that we may not have even known were there, because the process helps us to notice things in the classroom that we would not normally notice. Reflective practice is also the foundation for true school improvement. Any system introduced, such as the outcome-based education system, can't be truly implemented or successful without the teachers at the ground level reflectively and thoughtfully applying the principles in the actual classroom. For instance, right now in Hong Kong we're at a stage where the framework of OBE is set in place. So we have OBE on paper. However, the teachers must be able and willing to critically examine both their own practice as well as their students individually and collectively to find out how they learn best in such a system. Action research also helps us to research unique local situations. There's a huge body of educational research, literature, but it doesn't usually allow for local settings. So action research helps you to investigate problems and seek solutions in a professional manner in your own local setting. Fourthly, teachers can research an area of teaching interest. As with traditional academic research, you can choose an area of interest. So you can say that it customizes professional development opportunities because you can capitalize on your own unique interests, your own individual or the interests of a team of teachers who can perform action research together. It also connects research with teaching. So at one end, it requires us to test our ideas about education. And at the other end, it can help us fine-tune and justify our own teaching practices. But in fact, I'll explain a lot more about this later, this idea of the connection between research and teaching. Finally, it's a very effective form of professional development because firstly, it helps to ascertain what professional development needs are. But in itself, it is a process of professional development. So because it actually improves our own practices, you can say in a sense that we actually do it for our own benefit, because it improves our own professional judgment and it gives us insight into how to become into better and more effective means of achieving the desired educational outcomes. Now, Mertler here is someone that I refer to constantly throughout this presentation. In his book, he had written a very simple list of 5 whys you should do action research. So I've just copied them as is. I thought they were very straightforward. So firstly, it deals with your own problems, not somebody else's. Secondly, it's timely. You can start whenever you're ready, and it provides immediate results. Thirdly, it gives opportunities to understand and therefore improve our educational practices. It can also build collegiality if it's done as part of a team. And lastly, he says, action research provides educators with alternative ways of viewing and approaching educational questions and problems, and with new ways of examining our own educational practices. So, with all these benefits, why is it not more well known or practiced? Well, it's still relatively new compared to traditional academic research as a field. It's actually part of SOTL, the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning, which has been a growing field in the last few decades. And more journals now are being devoted to the subject of action research, so I hope that we will see it growing more. But another reason is that it can be time consuming. In normal academic research, the researcher has to define a research question, then conduct the research. That's basically it. But in action research, on top of defining the question and conducting the research, the teacher/researcher has to then implement changes, then monitor those changes, and then plan more actions. So it becomes a cyclical and a longer process, which is potentially never ending. In fact, in reality, the process usually ends when you run out of funds or the end of the semester comes, but it could potentially be ongoing. Finally, it's more open-ended than traditional research, because you don't always know where it's going to lead you. So it can therefore be a little more difficult to conduct and to write up. So it needs more flexibility and continual reflection to make it work. Now, there are some similarities to traditional academic research in that there are the same concerns about validity and reliability. You use the same kind of research methods, qualitative or quantitative or mixed methods. And like with all research, the results are authoritative but not conclusive. The results remain tentative solutions that require monitoring and evaluation in order to identify strengths and limitations. And also, both types of research involve a cycle with similar elements where we define the research question, we do a literature review, we design a study, collect data and analyse it, and then we draw conclusions from our data. All those are similar elements. But there are some important differences with action research, especially at the beginning and the end of the cycle. Firstly, at the beginning, with traditional research, you will start with a research question before you do your data collection and analysis and so on. The research question guides you. But with action research, at the beginning of the cycle, you used to start with a general direction and you discover the research question as you go. And secondly, the process is cyclical. Where traditional research will conclude with a conclusion, action research starts again with an action plan, which is a specific action to be taken, like some adjustment in your teaching or your classroom management or something like that, or whatever your focus is. Then that whole cycle of data collection and analysis and reflection repeats again. Depending on your situation and your purpose, there may never actually be a clear ending to your study. You just decide yourself when it finishes. The action plan is like the central part of the process. This is essentially a proposed strategy for implementing the results of your action research project. As the action plan is implemented, its effectiveness must continually be monitored, evaluated and revised, thus perpetuating the cyclical nature of action research. So other differences are that you're personally involved in the cycle. In traditional research, we're somewhat removed from the situation that we're studying, but as action researchers, we're active participants and active observers of the whole learning process. So we must analyse and interpret classroom information and then use that information as a basis for future action planning. Secondly, it's classroom-based. So research and teaching are integrated together in the classroom as the research incorporates the change in the teaching process. Also, the research is more directly related to improving the quality of teaching and learning. The immediate purpose is to make your own instructional practices more effective, so immediate solutions are put in place with action research. Now, some might be saying, well, I regularly reflect on my own teaching and I try new techniques anyway, so what's the difference between normal teaching like that and action research? Action research is more methodical and more systematic. It involves a systematic examination of the instructional process and its effects on students' learning. And it can also be collaborative if you do it together in teams. Maybe most importantly, it's not simply problem solving, and it's not simply the trying out of new techniques in the classroom. And it's not the simple implementation of predetermined answers to educational questions. It explores, discovers, and works to find creative solutions to educational problems. Now, Lingnan already has several programs in place to support teachers and to help them improve their teaching. So I've been asked to explain what are the differences between doing action research and these other programs that we already have in place. So firstly, we have the end of semester CTLE, which is basically summative and once only at the end of the semester. It gives feedback on the course and the teacher as a whole, which doesn't necessarily benefit those students you've just been teaching. And it may or may not benefit the next lot of students depending on whether the teacher actually takes any action or not. The online CTLE is a slight improvement on that because you can use this anytime during the semester. However, when it is used, it tends to be used just once only, whereas in action research it involves repeated cycles of data collection or feedback gathering. In fact, you can use the online CTLE to do action research, but it would have to be done repeatedly in the part of that process of data collection and analysis and action and so on. Then we have peer observation and faculty mentoring, two various schemes which are not really as well used as they could be, and we'd like them to be better used. However, these are different to action research because these rely on classroom observations or advised by faculty peers. There's no direct student feedback in these programs. The Student Consultant Program is a program we're always wanting to promote. That does involve observation and reflection, and it does have good results. But it works differently to action research in that it uses a student consultant to kind of bridge the gap between the classroom and the teacher. With action research, it's the teacher himself or herself who actually gives the feedback directly from the students in a more systematic way. So, and it's the teacher's responsibility to reflect on that feedback and then to implement the changes. So in short, all these are programs that are designed to help Lingnan teachers to improve your learning and learn about your own teaching. Action research is not a program as such like these are, but it's more a tool to help you with your teaching. If you know the principles of action research, you can customize it and you can use it in your own situation, and you can also collaborate with others and do it collaboratively if you wish. It's a very flexible tool. Also, it can lead to very quickly to more radical and noticeable changes in the classroom and in the materials, as you can see now in Preet's part of her presentation.
Thank you, Julie. So what Julie talked about is the basic principles behind what exactly you understand by action research. What I'm going to talk about is a project that we conducted last year in our department, and which will show you through the more pragmatic and the more practical aspects of action research and how it is done. The course that we did was the genre-based language course. This is an English language course which all students at Lingnan are required to take. It is the fourth course after the 3 courses that CEIL offers. And essentially the course is aimed at helping students to look at different kinds of texts and understand how texts vary according to their social situations. In other words, the assumption is that we help students to look at different texts, understand the different aspects of the text, so that they can apply them in their everyday lives and in other situations. Having said that, the intended learning outcomes of the course were designed in a manner where students recognize and appreciate a range of academic and non-academic genres, and they will end up evaluating the texts from a genre-based perspective. They analyze various language features, structural features, and other strategies of the text. So basically it's a text analysis that they do. And once they are familiarized with the text, they are asked to adapt and create new texts and produce new spoken and written versions of various texts. The action research project that we did was essentially more of a qualitative approach of investigating how students actually learn and what are students doing when they are working on these different kinds of texts. Now, I just want to give you a background about why we chose to do an action research project on outcomes. Because initially, I mean, in the last 3 or 4 years of outcomes-based education at Lingnan, what has happened is there have been a lot of workshops and a lot of stuff been going on in terms of writing of the outcomes, making sure they map to the assessments. Basically, you assess what you teach. So say, for example, assignment number 1 will be assessing outcomes 2, 3, and 4, and so on and so forth. Assignment number 2 will assess outcomes 4 and 5. So as far as that process of mapping of the outcomes is concerned, we are pretty much there at Lingnan. So most of us have been able to draw our outcomes and have our relevant assignments mapped onto them. Now, what happens between the two hasn't been done yet, and that's the next way forward. So that's the reason why we decided to take forward this particular project, where we don't want to see whether the assignments actually test the outcomes or not. That's already been done. We wanted to see what happens. What do students do in order to achieve those outcomes? How is it that students actually prepare themselves to make sure that they are achieving those outcomes and preparing themselves for those assignments? So that's where this project came into being. So, like what I said, so we're investigating students' learning practices and processes of learning for achieving their outcomes. In other words, we are trying to maximize their opportunities for effective learning practices through a process of reflecting and taking action, and reflecting and taking action. So it's more of a cyclical process. We used different ways of finding out how students learn and what is it students do to, or what are the problems that students face when they are learning. So we did that through a set of research tools, data collection tools essentially, by observing classrooms, classroom teaching, through classroom observations, through an ongoing reflective practice of students filling up reflective journals and teachers reflecting on their teaching, having detailed discussions with students as well as with the teachers through focus group interviews and interviews with teachers. And not only through these particular perceptions collected through the feedback, but also through little production of students' work. So we also tried to see if what they were saying is reflected in the work that they produce. So these were the essential things that we did in terms of collecting feedback and trying to take action based on that feedback. Now, if we talk about the action research cycle, I'd just like to take you through that action research cycle. A normal teaching and learning process is where, a good teacher who's really interested in helping students learn will subconsciously or consciously do these things. So in a sense, the teacher would usually try to understand how students learn and what are their problems. He or she will try to address those problems by saying, okay, this particular concept is not understood by my students well, let me try it out the other way. So basically the teacher is subconsciously taking an action. And then the teacher sees that, okay, this method, or if I try to do this differently, probably it's working with the students, so there's an observation taking place there. And probably later the teacher is reflecting on that and saying, yeah, I think if I teach this particular topic in this way, it definitely works. So the normal teaching cycle of any teacher is usually this. What action research does is it actually helps you to systematize, all right, and put it into an organized manner through different ways through organized systematic collection and writing of those stages of teaching and learning. So you have a cycle of planning where you basically go through the process of understanding, you go through the process of understanding what the problems of the students are, and that is what we did is we basically formed a team, and I sat together with the teachers who were teaching the course. We had 2 more teachers who had enrolled onto the project, and we were teaching this particular course. And we tried to plan and see what is it that works with the students, and what are the problems that we actually anticipate in terms of the students. And let's try to find out how students are working on this particular outcome, let's say in week number 2 or 3. The second stage is essentially an action that the teacher takes by designing a special task or an activity to address that problem. Like I said, the third one is observing, and finally it is reflecting. Now what happens is over here, the cycle does not stop here. So there is a constant, it is not a cycle essentially, it's a spiral. So once based on a plan, an action, an observing, and a reflection, this goes on to the next cycle of the same steps. So what you're doing is, after taking that particular action over here and reflecting on it, you go back to the same cycle of planning, observing, acting, and reflecting. And this continues over a period of time. All right, okay, so before we start, what I'd like you to do is, in your sheets, I think Julie has given you all a sheet right now. Yes, okay. So let's just think about the courses that you teach right now. And okay, all right. Think about the courses that you teach currently, and in the context of the courses that you teach, what I would like you to discuss amongst yourselves. What are the problems encountered by your students in terms of three particular aspects? I mean, one of the aspects could be either understanding. So as a teacher, do you see that students are finding it difficult to understand concepts? Or probably do you find it that, students are able to comprehend or understand the concept, but they are not able to apply it? Or is it that, they are able to understand, they're able to apply, but they're not able to express it or produce it in a concrete form? So having taught for this particular semester, think of the courses that you have taught and think of the situations where you have faced and what kind of problems you have seen with your students, and just what could be some of the reasons or the causes for those problems. You may discuss some for some time amongst yourselves. Maybe 10 minutes? 5 minutes? Okay. 5 minutes, yeah.